Libra, let me ask you something. And don't answer out loud yet. When was the last time you felt quietly exhausted, even though, on the outside, everything looked fine? You've been holding it together, doing what's expected, saying the right things. But inside, there's a pressure you haven't named, a feeling that keeps looping, like something is about to break, or finally be said. And here's the part you can't ignore. In the next few hours, a message, a call, or a sentence from someone else's mouth is going to hit exactly where you've been silent, not to scare you, but to wake you up. If you're Libra, and this feels personal, stay with me. Listen closely, because this isn't random. And what comes next might be the moment everything shifts. Libra, stay right here with me. I'm not talking to everyone, I'm talking to you. The one listening quietly. The one who felt that small tightening in the chest a moment ago. You've been carrying a kind of pressure that doesn't make noise. No drama, no explosions, just weight. You wake up, you move through the day, you do what needs to be done. And to the world, you look steady, reliable, balanced. But balance, when it's held too long, can start to feel like strain. Because here's the truth you don't say out loud. You've been holding opposing sides together with your own breath. Your needs on one side, everyone else's expectations on the other. And somewhere along the way, you became the bridge, not the destination. There's a moment that keeps repeating for you. It might be early morning or late at night, when the noise fades. And suddenly you feel it, that quiet thought, the one that doesn't shout, the one that simply asks, is this really all there is right now? You don't panic, you don't fall apart, you just go still. Because Libra, you've mastered composure. You know how to keep things peaceful, even when peace costs you something. And that's the part no one sees. The exhaustion that comes from always being the reasonable one, the fair one, the understanding one. You didn't get here because you're weak. You got here because you care. Because you see both sides, because you were taught that harmony matters. But harmony without honesty slowly drains the light from a room. You may have noticed it already. That feeling of going through motions instead of moments, of responding instead of choosing, of existing instead of expanding. And here's something I want you to hear clearly. This pressure you're feeling is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that something inside you is ready to breathe again. Think about this for a second. When was the last time you made a decision without first checking how it would affect everyone else? Not because you don't care, but because you trusted yourself enough to matter too. There's a reason this is surfacing now. Not to overwhelm you, not to rush you, but to invite you into a deeper conversation with yourself. One where you don't have to perform balance. You get to feel it. And as we keep moving forward together, you'll start to notice something subtle shifting. A soft opening, a crack where light gets in. You don't need answers yet. You don't need a plan. Just awareness. Just this moment of recognition that what you've been carrying doesn't have to be permanent. So take a slow breath here. Let your shoulders drop. And ask yourself gently, without judgment, without pressure, what would it feel like to stop holding everything together alone? Stay with me. Because from here, the story doesn't get louder. It gets clearer. Libra, let's stay in this space a little longer. Because the reason you haven't left yet has nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with who you are. You're not someone who walks away easily. You don't disappear when things get complicated. You don't shut the door just because it's heavy. You were built to consider, to weigh, to pause long enough to feel the impact of your choices on other people. That's your gift. And sometimes, it becomes your burden. You learned early that your word matters. That commitment isn't just something you say, it's something you carry. So when you stay, it's not because you don't see what's wrong. It's because you see everything. You see the history, the effort, the moments that almost worked. You see the version of the story that could still be saved. And you keep holding space for it. Long after it stopped holding you, there's a quiet loyalty in you that doesn't get enough credit. A loyalty that doesn't come from obligation, but from integrity. You don't want to be the one who breaks the balance, the one who causes pain, the one who didn't try hard enough. So you keep trying. But here's the part no one warned you about. When you stay somewhere that slowly erases you, your body notices before your mind does. It shows up as tiredness that sleep doesn't fix, as a heaviness in the chest that comes and goes, as a sense that you're present but not fully alive. And you tell yourself it's normal, that this is just what adulthood feels like, that everyone carries something. But deep down, you know the difference between carrying life and carrying yourself away. You didn't stay because love was still flowing. You stayed because responsibility was louder, because doing the right thing felt safer than doing the honest thing. And Libra, that's not a flaw. That's a reflection of how deeply you care. Still, there comes a moment when caring for others starts to cost you your own voice. And that's where you've been standing. Not at a dramatic breaking point, just at a quiet edge. The kind of edge where nothing collapses. But nothing grows either. Let me ask you something gently. If no one judged you, if no one needed an explanation, if you didn't have to justify your choice to anyone at all, what would your body want right now? Not your role, not your reputation, your body. Because your body doesn't care about appearances. It cares about truth. And the truth is, you've been carrying a version of loyalty that asks you to disappear a little more each day. That's why leaving feels so hard. Not because you're unsure, but because you're kind. And kindness, when it has no boundaries, can turn inward and become self-neglect. This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. About realizing that staying isn't always strength. Sometimes it's just habit dressed up as virtue. As we keep moving together, something important is going to surface. Not a demand, not an ultimatum, just clarity. The kind that doesn't push you, but quietly stands in front of you and waits to be seen. So stay here with me. Let this understanding settle. Because once you see why you stayed, you'll finally be able to see what you actually need next. Libra, let me stay close to you here. Because this part, the anxiety part, is not something you talk about easily. At night, your body finally lies still. The lights go down. The world quiets. But your mind does the opposite. It starts walking through conversations that never happened. Outcomes you cannot predict. Doors you are afraid to open because you cannot see what's on the other side yet. You don't spiral loudly. You don't panic in obvious ways. Your anxiety is subtle, polite. It shows up as silence. You stare at the ceiling. You replay the same question in different forms. What happens if I leave and everything falls apart for them, for me, for everyone? And then comes the next thought. The one you don't like admitting. Am I being selfish for wanting more than this? That question cuts deep because you were never taught to put yourself first without guilt. You were taught to be fair, to be thoughtful, to carry responsibility with grace. So when your nervous system starts shaking quietly, you tell yourself to calm down, to be reasonable, to wait it out. But this isn't fear of the unknown. This is the anxiety of someone who already knows too much to pretend anymore. You've gone far enough down this road to understand what staying costs. And that awareness is heavy. It's the kind of weight that doesn't let you turn around easily, but doesn't let you move forward without trembling either. You don't talk about this anxiety because it doesn't sound dramatic enough, because there's no crisis others can see, because on paper you look fine, but your body knows the truth. It tightens when certain topics come up. It exhales when you imagine distance. It reacts before your logic catches up. And Libra, that doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest on a level deeper than words. You've been carrying the pressure of holding the emotional balance for too long, always thinking 3 steps ahead, always calculating the impact, always making sure no one else tips over even if you do. And now your system is asking quietly but firmly for relief. Here's something important that doesn't get said enough. Anxiety like this is not a warning that you're making the wrong move. It's often a sign that you've stayed past the moment your soul felt safe to rest. Let me ask you something, and take your time with it. When you imagine staying exactly as things are 6 months from now, a year from now, does your chest soften, or does it tighten? You don't need to answer me, just notice. Because your body has been having this conversation long before your mind allowed it. And as we keep moving forward, you're going to feel something else emerge beneath the anxiety. Not urgency, not pressure, support. A sense that you may not have to navigate this alone, even if you've been acting like you do. There's a shift coming, not loud, not chaotic, but real. And it begins the moment you stop judging yourself for feeling what you feel. Stay with me. Let this breath settle. Because the anxiety you've been holding is about to meet something different. Not answers yet, but reassurance. And that changes everything about how the next step feels. Libra, stay right here with me, because this is where the story softens and quietly widens. For a long time, you believed you were on your own with this, not because no one cared, but because you didn't want to burden anyone. You became very good at carrying things silently. You learned how to listen more than you speak, how to nod instead of explain, how to say, "I'm fine," in a way that sounded convincing. But there have been eyes on you, gentle ones, patient ones, people who noticed the pauses in your voice, the way you changed the subject, the way you laughed just a second too late. They didn't push, they didn't pry, they waited. Because the kind of support meant for you doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives when you're ready to receive it. And something is shifting now. You may not see it clearly yet, but you'll feel it. A moment when someone reaches out without being asked. A conversation that feels unexpectedly safe. A sense that you don't have to explain everything to be understood. This isn't about rescue. You don't need saving. It's about standing beside you instead of watching you hold everything together alone. You've spent so much time being the steady one that you forgot what it feels like to lean back for a second. To let someone else hold the weight, even briefly. And Libra, that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. There's a quiet courage in allowing support after years of self-reliance. In admitting, even silently, that you don't have to do this all by yourself anymore. You might notice it first in your body. A softer breath, a small release in the shoulders, a feeling of being seen without having to perform balance. This is not coincidence, and it's not charity, it's alignment. When you've been carrying too much for too long, life begins to send reminders that connection is not a failure of independence. It's a form of wisdom. You don't owe anyone your struggle, and you don't have to earn rest. The help coming toward you is not there to take control. It's there to remind you that you matter enough to be supported too. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you allowed someone to show up for you without immediately trying to even the scales, without planning how to repay it, without minimizing what you needed, just receiving? As you are. That moment may be closer than you think. And as this awareness settles, you'll feel the tone of the story changing again. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but with a sense of opening. Because when you realize you're not alone, you stop bracing. And when you stop bracing, clarity has room to arrive. Stay with me here. Let this feeling land. Because what comes next isn't about carrying less. It's about finally understanding what deserves to be carried and what never belonged to you in the first place. And once that becomes clear, the path ahead begins to reveal itself, one quiet truth at a time. Libra, stay with me. We're entering a quieter space now. But this is where everything begins to turn. The kind of change you're approaching doesn't arrive with noise. It doesn't kick the door open. It doesn't announce itself to the world. It comes softly, almost respectfully, like someone knocking once and waiting. In the next few hours, or very soon, there will be a conversation, a sentence, a piece of information that finds you when you're not fully guarded. It may come through a phone, or in person, or even through words you weren't meant to hear but somehow did. And at first it may seem ordinary. No dramatic music, no shock to the system. But something inside you will pause. Because what's being said lands too close to the truth you've been carrying alone. You'll feel it in your body before you understand it with your mind. A stillness, a sudden clarity, like fog lifting without warning, and the thought will come. Quiet. Almost surprised? Oh, so it wasn't just me. You'll realize you weren't imagining things. You weren't overthinking. You weren't asking for too much. You were responding to something real long before anyone gave it a name. This moment doesn't expose anyone. It doesn't demand action. It simply removes doubt. And Libra, that is powerful. Because doubt has been the only thing keeping you suspended. Not fear, not lack of courage, just uncertainty. This is the kind of news that doesn't push you forward. It grounds you. It brings your intuition and your reality into the same room for the first time in a long while. You may replay the words later, not because they were loud, but because they were accurate. They confirm something you've been feeling but didn't trust yourself enough to say out loud. And in that confirmation, a subtle shift happens. Your shoulders drop. Your breathing changes. The inner debate quiets. Not because everything is solved, but because you finally feel oriented. Let me ask you something gently. What if this moment isn't here to force a decision, but to give you permission to stop questioning your own experience? What if the clarity you've been waiting for was never meant to arrive as certainty, but as recognition? This news doesn't rewrite your past. It reframes it. It shows you that the pressure, the anxiety, the exhaustion had a reason. And that reason matters. You don't have to respond immediately. You don't have to explain anything to anyone. Just notice how different it feels to stand on solid ground again after so long in emotional fog. This is not the climax of the story. It's the turning point, the moment where things stop being confusing and start being honest. And as this truth settles in you, you'll feel another question rising. Not rushed, not demanding, just waiting. What do I do now that I see clearly? We'll get there. Slowly. Because once clarity arrives, choice begins to breathe. And that's where the next layer of your journey quietly starts to unfold. Libra. Let's slow this moment down together. Because now that the fog has lifted, You're standing in a space that feels unfamiliar, not loud, not urgent, but impossible to ignore. This is the part where nothing explodes, nothing collapses. And yet everything inside you knows that going back to sleep is no longer an option. You see it clearly now. Not choosing has been a choice. Staying silent has been a decision. Remaining in the same loop has been a way of saying yes to something that keeps hurting quietly. And I know that realization doesn't come with relief right away. It comes with weight. Because once you know, you can't unknow. You don't need to make a move today. You don't need to announce anything. You don't need a plan written in stone. But you also can't keep pretending that you don't feel the truth moving through you. There's a different kind of tension now. Not anxiety, not fear. It's awareness, the kind that sits in your chest and gently presses forward every time you try to distract yourself. You may notice it when you're doing something ordinary. Driving, washing dishes, lying awake just before sleep. A thought appears. Not dramatic, not emotional, just honest. I can't keep living like this. And Libra, that thought isn't a threat. It's a boundary forming. You've spent so much of your life asking what's fair, what's reasonable, what's expected, that you forgot to ask a different question. What brings me peace when no one is watching? Not the peace that looks good from the outside. The peace that lets your body soften. The peace that doesn't require explanation. This choice you're facing is not about right versus wrong. It's about alignment versus endurance. You've already proven you can endure. You don't need to prove that again. The real question now is whether you're willing to honor what your inner world has been quietly asking for. And that can feel unsettling, because peace can feel unfamiliar when you've been living in constant adjustment. There may be guilt that rises up, concern about how others will react, a reflex to minimize your needs. That's normal. But notice something important. For the first time in a long while, the answer isn't outside of you. It's not hidden in someone else's approval. It's not waiting for permission. It's already forming inside you as a calm, steady knowing. You don't need to rush toward it. Just stop running away from it. Let me ask you something gently. If choosing peace meant disappointing someone, but staying meant disappointing yourself, which disappointment could you live with? You don't have to answer right now. Just let the question breathe. Because this moment isn't demanding action, it's asking for honesty. And once honesty enters the room, change doesn't need to be forced. It begins to happen naturally. You may not see the full path yet. That's okay. Clarity doesn't always show the destination. Sometimes it only shows the direction. And right now, that direction is pulling you toward yourself. Stay with me here. Let this awareness settle into your bones. Because once you stop avoiding the choice stops feeling like a threat. It starts to feel like relief. And from that place, something softer and more compassionate is waiting to meet you next. Libra, come a little closer for this part. Because this is where your heart hesitates. Not out of doubt, but out of kindness. You've worried about this more than you admit. About how you'll be seen. About the story that might be told about you once you stop holding everything together. You don't want to be cold. You don't want to be careless. You don't want to walk away and leave pain behind you like broken glass. That's never been who you are. You've spent your life reading rooms, sensing emotional temperature, adjusting yourself just enough so no one else feels the impact. And now that you're considering letting go, there's a quiet fear underneath it all. What if I become the villain in someone else's version of this story? Let me tell you something gently. Something that doesn't get said enough. You can leave without becoming cruel, You can choose yourself without turning your back on your values. Letting go doesn't have to look like rejection. Sometimes it looks like honesty, the kind that doesn't raise its voice, the kind that doesn't explain itself endlessly. You don't owe anyone your exhaustion as proof of love. You don't have to suffer to be considered good. And Libra, this is important. Your empathy does not obligate you to carry what was never meant to be yours. You were never meant to be the container for someone else's unhealed patterns, or the emotional buffer that keeps everything from falling apart. There is a difference between compassion and self-erasure, and you've been standing on that line for a long time. Buong bo lan nai, this letting go is not running away. It's recognizing the moment when staying requires you to disappear, and choosing not to disappear anymore. You don't need to harden your heart. You don't need to close yourself off. You don't need to rewrite who you are. All you need is to stop crossing your own boundaries in the name of peace. Because peace that costs you your voice is not peace. It's quiet suffering. You're allowed to say this no longer works for me without attacking anyone, without listing reasons, without making it dramatic. Clarity does not require cruelty. And here's something else to consider. Not everyone will understand your choice. Some may project their own fears onto it. Some may need a villain because they're not ready to face change. That doesn't mean you are one. It means you've outgrown a role that kept you small. Let me ask you something softly. If you could walk away with your integrity intact, your heart open, your nervous system finally calm, would you still call that selfish? Or would you call it survival done with grace? This is where self-rescue begins, not with anger, not with blame, but with respect for yourself, for your limits, for the life you still want to feel fully inside. You're not breaking anything sacred, you're honoring something sacred that's been ignored. And as you let this truth settle, you may feel lighter and heavier at the same time. That's normal. Release and grief often arrive together, but so does relief. Stay with me here. Let this understanding sink in. Because when you realize you don't have to become someone else to be free, you'll feel a new kind of strength forming. Quiet, grounded, unapologetic. And from that place, something unexpected begins to appear. Not loss, but space. Space for the next chapter to step forward without forcing its way in. And that is where the story starts to open in a completely new way. Libra. Let's take this last stretch slowly. Not because you're fragile, because what you're stepping into deserves gentleness. After you hear what you needed to hear, after you let the truth stand in the room with you, something shifts in a way that's hard to explain. It's not fireworks. It's not instant happiness. It's quieter than that. It's the feeling of no longer arguing with yourself. For so long, you've been negotiating with your own intuition, talking yourself out of what you felt, rationalizing what your body already knew. And that inner tug of war is what exhausted you more than anything else. So when you finally stop resisting the truth, when you stop trying to make the scales perfect, something inside you softens. Not because life is suddenly easy, but because you're no longer split in two. That is the beginning of relief. You may notice it first in small places, in the way you breathe when you wake up, in the way you move through a room, in the way your eyes hold contact with yourself in the mirror without flinching. You begin to feel light again. Not the careless kind of light. The honest kind. The kind that comes from alignment. And Libra, I need you to understand this. A lighter season doesn't mean a perfect season. It means a truer one. It means you stop building your life around what you can tolerate and start building it around what you can trust. And trust starts inside. You start trusting your signals, your instincts, your pauses. The part of you that knows when something is off, even if you can't explain it in a neat sentence. You may still feel sadness. You may still grieve what could have been. That's human. But grief is different when you're not abandoning yourself. It becomes cleansing. It becomes sacred. Like rain that finally falls after a long, dry season. You'll also notice something else. When you stop fighting yourself, people around you adjust. Some will respect your clarity. Some will feel uncomfortable. Some may try to pull you back into the old balance because they benefited from you always being the one to bend. That's okay. You're not here to stay convenient. You're here to stay whole. Let me ask you something softly. What if the biggest news coming in hours is not just a message from someone else, but a message from you finally delivered to you? A part of you that's been waiting patiently to be heard without interruption. Because Libra, you've always had a gift. You can hear what's unspoken in other people. You can sense what's hidden between words. But now the universe asks you to turn that gift inward, to listen to your own silence, to hear what your heart has been saying in the pauses, in the fatigue, in the longing for something more real. And when you do, you don't become a different person. You become a truer one, a calmer one, a clearer one. You'll still be kind, you'll still be thoughtful, you'll still care, but you won't disappear to keep the peace. And that is the moment a new chapter opens, not with noise, with space. So stay close to yourself now. Listen closely, not because someone is about to speak, because you are. And what you're about to hear from inside is the beginning of a life that finally feels like yours. If this hit you in a real place, leave me a comment with one word: truth. And if you want more messages like this, subscribe and come back. We're not done yet. Libra. Before you go, stay with me for one last breath. If this message found you tonight, or early this morning, or at a moment when you weren't even looking for answers, that is not accidental. Something in you was ready to stop circling the same thoughts, ready to stop negotiating with your own truth, ready to listen. And maybe that surprises you, because you're used to being the one who understands everyone else first. But this time, the understanding turned inward. That quiet shift you felt while listening, that soft recognition in your chest that wasn't fear and wasn't excitement, just clarity. That's your inner balance returning. Not the kind you perform for the world, the kind that finally feels honest. If your heart softened at any point during this story, if you caught yourself thinking, "This is exactly what I've been feeling," I want you to know something. You're not late, you're not broken, and you're not alone. You're right on time for a new way of being with yourself. So here's what I invite you to do. If this resonated, leave a comment below with a single word that describes how you're feeling right now. Peace, clarity, relief, or even uncertain. Your word might be exactly what someone else needs to see tonight. And if you felt held by this space, if you want more messages that speak to you, not at you, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. This is a place where Libra energy is honored, where balance doesn't mean self-sacrifice, where healing doesn't rush, and where your journey is respected. Most of all, trust yourself. Trust what stirred in you while you listened. Trust the calm that followed the insight. Trust that the next step will reveal itself when you're ready to see it. Because this isn't the end of the message. It's the beginning of a new chapter. The journey continues, and the next message is already on its way. Until then, Take care of your heart, Libra, and keep listening.